This will be the last review for the day, and this is a pretty interesting book that I found, and I wanted to say a little bit something about it because it's such a sort of off the beaten path kind of book, especially if you love the Renaissance. It's called the Lost Italian Renaissance: Humanists, Historians, and Latin's Legacy by Christopher S. Celenza. For some reason, well, I know what that reason is. It's the fact that we tend to order some relatively academic books from and scholarly books from academic publishers. So we get delivered to our house probably every month. I would say at least half a dozen. I just got one in the mail today. Books, or I should say, catalogs from Yale, Johns Hopkins, Princeton, University Press, University of Chicago, just all of these amazing, wonderful university presses that very often have discount sales, especially toward the end of the year when they're trying to get rid of their stock. And some of them have, 80, 90% discounts. Um, this was in one that I got about a year ago or so, and it was a $25 book. I think that I got for $5, and I was vaguely interested in the title, so I just got it on a whim. And it might have been suited for someone a little more thoroughly steeped in the formal study of the Italian Renaissance than I can really admit to being, but what it had to say about the current state of study in this area was pretty interesting. It certainly couches many of the problems of contemporary Italian Renaissance studies in interesting ways and makes the reader privy to a lot of insider information. Um, in this book, Celenza is mostly concerned with the formation and current state of Italian Renaissance studies, not so much the study of the Renaissance itself. So it's kind of a book about the contemporary state of Renaissance studies. So you're not going to read a lot about the history itself in the book, and particularly the effects that certain sources or lack thereof have wrought upon that study. The Lost Italian Renaissance is more a series of interconnected essays on a group of related themes than it is a book with a continuous argument. The first essay, for example, argues that 20th century Italian Renaissance studies seriously suffers from a lack of sources that were originally written in Latin for a number of reasons, but mostly because scholars from the previous, that is, 19th century, thought that non-vernacular languages were of at most secondary importance, mostly because of the rise of nationalist conceptions of history, like that of Herder, the German philosopher and thinker. Because of this, many of the most important sources in Latin still haven't been sourced, recorded, and critically edited for the sake of posterity. The second chapter discusses two contemporary scholars in the field, Eugenio Garin and Paul Oscar Christeller, and their comparative approaches to historiography and how they each contributed to a rediscovery of some of these important Latin manuscripts. The rest of the book tries to construct an approach to the Italian Renaissance by looking at philosophical approaches to history, including the well-known synchronic and diachronic opposition, and looking at the way individual thinkers like Claude Lévi-Strauss and Richard Rorty have thought about these problems. The last chapters try to build case studies and model intellectual history upon the ideas he's offered. And here he does actually get into a little bit of actual Renaissance history. He uses one essay to compare Lorenzo Valla to Marsilio Ficino, and the next to look at how traditional ideas of honor in the Italian Renaissance were tied to notions of masculinity and gender construction. I would recommend this to anyone with a, like I said, a more formal academic interest in this. Maybe someone going into graduate school to study the Italian Renaissance. I felt that I probably would have learned more had I been more familiar with some of the problematics that he was talking about, and the discussion about Eugenio Garin and Paul Oscar Christaller. But it was interesting nonetheless, so I just wanted to say a few words about it. The Lost Italian Renaissance: Humanists, Historians, and Latin's Legacy by Christopher S. Celenza.